We speak now with political analyst Dr. Hassan Khannenje. He is the director of the Horn International Institute of Strategic Studies in Nairobi. A very good evening to you, and thank you so much for speaking to us. Perhaps let's just start with those concerns that have been raised by Mr. Odinga around the voter integrity, and I want to talk about digitization of the system. You know that Africa has been gradually moving towards that, saying that the use of technology can actually be used to better improve the kind of auditing that he's speaking about. But it's also about understanding the problems. So for Kenya, what would you say it is, and what can be improved in the electoral system to address these problems?
I think one of the challenges that have been posed by the previous management was the lack of transparency and the opaque nature in which some of those things were done, especially digitally. And I think being able to not only guarantee that the system is going to be transparent, as well as candidates are going to be able to have access to information that is credible, that is current, is going, I think, to go a long way in giving confidence, not just to the candidates who are competing, but also the Kenyan voter, to avoid the situation such as the one that happened in 2017.
And looking at that, what was singled out was poor election management, including enactment of the Constitution. How different are the circumstances now?
I think the country is a lot more prepared right now, even though the Electoral Commission, the body, still faces certain challenges, in part because there's quite a bit of work they need to do, including verifying, ensuring there's no double registrations, there are no dead voters, and they only have 2 months to the election. And so being able to address that ahead of time is going to, I think, give the necessary confidence and impetus to ensure that the election goes on as planned, and is going to be able to at least be accepted in terms of the result by both who lost and those who won.
So if you can just take us through this, and I know some of it is technical, but it need not be. The issue of, for instance, biometric voter registration, there's electronic voter identification, but there's also the issue of the system itself, the transparency and trust in that. So what needs to be tinkered with in order to get people a sense that nobody is manipulating the system, that it's actually far more reliable? I really am just trying to understand what can Kenya do to avoid what has been seen as manipulation of the voters' roll, and particularly the results, because just looking at the social media, some people say it's not so much about who's counting the votes.
It is not so much also about the digitization. That is not exactly the problem. The problem has been the lack of confidence in the electoral body. And so the composition of it, which has always, of course, raised questions, with competing, interests, trying to poke holes or find, deficiencies within it, has been critical. And so I think it's incumbent upon the electoral body to be able, both in its composition, its performance, to give some confidence to Kenyans as well as competitors, because that is where the problem has been. It is lack of confidence in the electoral body. And I think that is why both candidates, at least the two leading candidates, in the last 2 days, they've been at pains to explain that they have confidence in the electoral body, because they also want their supporters, to be able to believe in it. Because in the absence of that trust and confidence, it does not matter what system is going to be used in voting as well as in tallying.
Okay. So there's also how Kenyans view, for instance, the results transmission, the interpretation thereof. Looking at some of the comments, they're saying, for instance, one was saying in particular, as we approach the 9th of August presidential contest, what I'm looking forward to is Raila's Mandela moment, as they've called it, Martha Karua's Kamala Harris moment, anything else to be held in abeyance until they are sworn in. So are people going to doubt anything that is not a reflection of that?
I think if the citizens and the voters see the process having been fair, especially now that elections or other results are going to be transmitted directly from the polling stations, if that remains consistent without being interrupted at any point, without any perception of interference, largely, I think there's a sense that citizens are going to accept the outcome. And the environment right now, it seems to be moving in that direction. There seems to be a consensus that, number one, this is a two-horse race, and number two, that most likely the outcome is going to be known after the first round, and there isn't going to be the need for the second round, in part because all it requires is 50 plus 1% to have an outright victory and and win the presidency.
So let's continue with that epic two-horse race, if people have been calling it. The thing that needs to underlie it, no doubt, is good leadership, people who have integrity. William Ruto has been running on what he sees as despotic kleptomaniac tendencies of millionaires who are leading the nation, as he called it. Can the tide change?
I don't know to what extent, of course, that narrative is easy to sell, but, to be fair, I think, the vice president is also a millionaire himself. But it's extremely a very good narrative, in part because of the situation of citizens and just the desperation economically that people are going through. However, I think one thing that is fundamental is to get leadership that is going to be accountable and transparent, because corruption, I think, is one of the biggest social ills in Kenya that has literally destroyed the economy and stunted its potential as well as growth and economic development. And so the two competing camps, one is trying to push the economic agenda. Another one is trying to push the accountability as well as economic agenda. Of course, the two competing groups, the leadership of them come from very different schools of thought, very different timelines. One is much older, coming from what they call the second liberation. Another one, of course, is much younger, coming from more recent, of course, history of politics in Kenya. And so the race is not, while it's been framed to be, based on issues and ideas alone, it's also partly generational, and it's reflected in some of the support that both parties have been getting.
Even if William Ruto is found to have laid a foundation of deceit, if others have accused him of propaganda against the current president and how he's even abused that, is Kenya ready for a young president? We've seen the continent over, even though they are proffered as an alternative, there seems to be an inane leaning into age and wisdom and experience as a source of comfort.
Yeah, I think when the campaign, especially before the leading candidates appointed the running mates, it was also being seen as a generational. And William Ruto, who is the current vice president, inspired a lot of hope, especially among the young. But increasingly, I think, there's a sense that is a choice between the unknown that is steady and the unknown or inexperienced on the other hand. And so the known that's steady, even though it's old, is represented by Raila Odinga. The unknown is represented, of course, by William Ruto. And so increasingly, and especially the appointment of the running mate again, or running mates, is also, having a significant role, especially I would say notably the election of, or the nomination of Martha Karua as the first female to be nominated by a major party in Kenya to run for president. And I think in the next weeks or so, the polls are going to demonstrate that there is probably a market shift that reflects some of those changes, and especially the women vote and the feelings, and I think the hopes that that may also have inspired among the women of Kenya. But that is not to take away from the fact that Ruto has also inspired a lot of Kenyan youth, especially because of his populist rhetoric that seems to resonate with a good number of young people, and especially those ones who are jobless.
We'll be watching those developments very keenly. Thank you so much for your time. Your insights, Dr. Hassan Khannenje, Director of the Horn International Institute of Strategic Studies in Nairobi, Kenya.